Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're getting into something that's both deeply personal and incredibly professional. How do we build real, genuine solidarity between women at work, especially when we come from different racial and cultural backgrounds? Let's just dive right in with this core idea. Proximity is not solidarity. Just because we work in the same office or sit in the same meetings doesn't automatically mean we're truly in it together. And that's really the challenge we're going to unpack today. So, everything we're talking about comes from a real-world experiment. Picture this. Almost 300 women got together, both online and in person, to have the conversations that, let's be honest, most of us avoid. The ones about bias, about those little microaggressions, and all those unspoken tensions that can just bubble under the surface at work. So, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start by busting the myth of automatic sisterhood. Then, we'll look at exactly where those bridges tend to break down. After that, we'll explore some actual rules for making real connections. And finally, we'll talk about how to make allyship something you do, not just something you talk about. Okay, first step, the myth of sisterhood. This quiet assumption that just because we're all women, we just get each other. But as you know, it's way, way more complicated than that. This really lays it out, right? The gap between what we assume and what's real. The source material really highlights how women of color are often dealing with this double whammy of both gender bias and racial bias. Now, white women absolutely face major barriers because of gender, but they don't typically have that extra layer of race to navigate. Acknowledging this isn't about creating a who has it worse competition. Not at all. It's just about seeing the whole complicated picture, because that's the only place real connection can even begin. And that's the heart of it, right? Solidarity isn't magic. It doesn't just show up because we want it to. It's something we have to actively build, one intentional and sometimes tough conversation at a time. I just love this quote from the group's facilitator. She was so honest about the fact that the real breakthroughs didn't happen when she tried to control everything or smooth over the tension. No, they happened when she leaned into the discomfort, when she allowed space for things to get a little messy and honest. But what does that discomfort even look like? Let's get into that. So let's talk about where things actually go wrong. Because if we can understand the most common friction points, we can figure out how to build those connections to be a lot stronger. These are the patterns that kept coming up in those conversations. These four themes just surfaced again and again. And it was rarely about people having bad intentions. It was much more about these unacknowledged patterns of behavior that slowly but surely create distance. Let's dig into a couple of these. Okay, this one is huge. The fear of saying the wrong thing, of messing up. It can be absolutely paralyzing. So many women in the group admitted that the pressure to be the perfect ally actually stopped them from being a present one. They were so scared of making a mistake that they just stayed silent, right at the moment when their voice was needed most. And this gets to the heart of another massive barrier: emotional labor. The women of color in the group talked about how utterly exhausting it is to constantly be in a position of educating others about what they go through, all while trying to manage their own feelings about it. It's like this invisible second job that nobody ever acknowledges. So, with all these barriers, how did the group actually move past them? How did they manage to turn all that discomfort into actual connection? Well, they created a framework. They decided they weren't there to debate each other, they were there to understand each other. And they used a really clear set of ground rules to do it. These 5 rules were absolute game changers. They totally shifted the energy. Instead of just waiting for their turn to talk, people started listening to actually learn. Instead of making sweeping generalizations, they spoke from their own personal experiences. And this is the big one. When things got tense, they chose curiosity over getting defensive. That little shift, from focusing on your good intentions to focusing on your actual impact, it was transformative. And this shift, it was everything. It took this incredible pressure off the women of color to feel like they had to be a spokesperson for their entire race. It allowed every single person in the room to just be seen as an individual with a unique story. And that is where empathy finally had a chance to grow. Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. How do we take these huge lessons from a private conversation and actually apply them in our daily lives at work? I think the main idea here is that allyship isn't a destination. It's not a badge you earn. It's a practice. It's about the little choices you make every single day. It's about staying in the conversation, even when it gets uncomfortable, and always asking yourself, okay, how can I show up better right now? So what does that look like practically? Here are 3 small but really powerful things you can start doing like today. First, Amplify others. When a colleague, especially a woman of color, makes a great point in a meeting, repeat it and give her the credit. That's a great point, Sarah. Second, advocate for people in private. Use your influence in the rooms that they're not in. And third, when you feel that defensive walls starting to go up, just pause, take a breath, and choose curiosity. Ask a question instead of making a statement.
And really, this is what it all boils down to. Progress doesn't come from some grand gesture. It happens in those small, consistent, everyday choices. Who you choose to advocate for, whose ideas you make sure get heard, and who you give the benefit of the doubt to.
Look, closing this gap isn't easy. It means we have to consciously move past being silent and avoiding the tough stuff and move toward real, intentional connection. So we'll leave you with this final thought to carry with you. Maybe the real question isn't whether we're ready for these conversations. Maybe it's just whether we're willing.